Doom. Right after I uploaded my last video, I was busy doing all sorts of things. Somehow I managed to get married, move twice and spent most of my time trying to make ends meet. And as stupid as this may sound, my entire YouTube journey has happened entirely in my own head from this point onwards. Even doing completely unrelated activities, it's the stuff that occupied my mind when daydreaming. I made up a whole range of weird inside jokes and entire plots that I'd be able to integrate into all of my following videos for when the time has finally come. But I realized that waiting for some oddly specific time frame would be quite fatal, at least in my case. Just like your and my time on this planet is fairly limited. Pardon the interruption. So just to let you know, the somewhat sentimental speech was recorded in March of this year, and I was expecting to get this video uploaded the very same month. But right after recording this, all sorts of things have been happening here, there and there, which in retrospect were all part of a fully fledged Matrix attack. So to establish a bit of context, the whole premise of this video is fairly simple. I have a computer that is running bare metal DOS and I want to make it run the original 1993 shareware version of Doom through sheer keyboard input. And I know what some of you might be thinking. Why should I make an entire video about A:\enter and install enter? But no. That would be called installing Doom through sheer keyboard input and a floppy drive. You get the idea. So that's what my plan was going to look like. First, pick a target machine with bare metal DOS. Second, turn Doom into a sequence of keystrokes. And finally, shove that thing up the laptop's low bandwidth urethra that is called the PS2 port. So when looking at an already installed copy of Doom, it's obvious that I wasn't gonna type that thing in by hand, but rather pretend to do so. But why even? Some of you might be asking. And is this supposed to be like a real-life implementation of some weird chat group law? One might also think. And to be fair, I carried this idea in the back of my head since like 2019, and the underlying punchline or pointe has somewhat been forgone since then. But I'm very sure that I was inspired by the sudden onslaught of bad USB and USB killer script kiddie content from back then. And my very first idea was to make use of this Raspberry Pi Zero that normally serves as my FM transmitter. Where's the link? Where's the exe? Where can I download the exe? Okay, now since we've got the bad USB thingy set up, why don't we take a regular USB cable, plug that in right here, and to convert the USB signal, let's get one of these bad boys involved. Stop. Don't try to propose this. It's a bullshit approach, and if you want to know why, feel free to look at this video of mine. Regardless, there was still another thing that had to be taken care of. Even if I managed to get these PS2 shenanigans to work, I'd still have to come up with some huge-ass sequence of keystrokes to have Doom binary files magically spawn out of thin air. And what is the... Boah, geht deine Mutter f... And what is that huge-ass keystroke sequence even gonna look like? You might argue that I could just spam all of these data right into a hex editor. Rightfully so. But where's that hex editor gonna come from? Keep in mind, there's just a computer, a keyboard and command.com, MS-DOS's default command line interpreter. The cool thing is, is that Command-Com allows you to do so-called piping. Warum taucht die Scheiße? Command.com allows you to do so-called piping, a process in which you take the output of a command and have that sent to a serial device or a plain file. So when saying echo hello world, the command's output is gonna be, you might have guessed it, hello world. And when telling Command-Com to pipe that output into a file rather than displaying it, you will end up with a file that contains hello world. At this point, piping is like a cute fun fact that's nice to know about, but we are still very far away from Doom. So instead of a plain text file, we'd now like to have a standalone exe that is able to print the string hello world on its own. And things are gonna get tricky from this point onwards. When looking at a bare bones hello world program for DOS, a really simple and straightforward one, you will realize that some of that bytecode cannot be typed in using a standard keyboard, rendering the whole piping approach useless unless there's a dirty trick that we might use. A dirty trick from the old DOS days that the entire cybersecurity industry still happens to rely on. Look at this string right here. If you would save this as a file and then try to do something with it, that will make all antiviruses except for brain.exe lose their respective shit. And that file is not malicious in itself, but all antiviruses have been Pavloved to treat it as such, for testing purposes. This thing doesn't even do anything nowadays, but when run on 32-bit or DOS-based versions of Windows, or bare metal DOS itself, it basically behaves like a hello world program, and actually is. This was achieved by raw dogging the x86 machine language and making use of the headerless COM file format from back then. The program only consists of ASCII typable CPU instructions, some bytes of seemingly random data, and the string that it should print. Once loaded into memory, the program would then perform some bitwise operations on those seemingly random data and turn them into executable bytecode that's required to print stuff onto a screen and finally have the CPU run it. So the overall idea was to write a bare bones hex editor in a similar manner, have Command-Com pipe that into a file, and then use that to hex dump the Doom executable and all of the required assets right into the computer's hard drive. And luckily there's an old program out there that can do this ASCII conversion on its own. Just give it a COM file and COM to text will take care of it. Absolute magic. So I've been mentally undusting my x86 assembly skills during a live stream, ran my binary abomination through com.txt and was basically done at this point. And pretending to be a native PS2 keyboard, that's an Arduino's job. There even is a library for this, so I won't even have to worry about all those technical details surrounding this obsolete protocol. Or at least that's what I have been thinking for many years. But at first I had to desecrate a PS2 cable and somehow attach that thing to the Arduino. So listen up, here's the situation. I'm rocking this beat all over the nation. With Masterboy Brain Rot, I'm taking you higher to eat the insulation, that's my desire. Oh! To keep it short, the Arduino seemed to do its thing. But when trying to have it type a piece of text, I ended up with some keystrokes sent twice or not sent at all. And I assumed that this could have been due to bad soldering. Okay, not a cable issue, just an isolation issue maybe. Resist the temptation, keep it tight with amateur soldering, get your circuits right, voice is getting louder, feel the power, Eurodance rhythm, the void will devour. But no, this was a code-related problem. Even when painfully slowed down, the issue would remain, paving my pathway towards agonizing amounts of trial and error and a slight loss of temper in between. There's absolutely no way to pull it off like this. So maybe I'm just too focused on this idea of fixing it, of pretending to be the fucking hero in the situation right here. Maybe you have a reasonable approach. Redundancy and checks. Redundancy and checks. At the stage I'm currently at, that's what I believe. I could get the job done faster by hand. To simply get one line, to simply get a one-liner sent, to simply get a, I'm sure with 2 million bytes, this would get out of sync. This would get out of sync somehow. I would have to implement pauses. And then write some shitty assembly code for DOS to wait for some specific type frame so that it is aware that this is now a new line inside of a quadruple of like different lines of a transmission. This is going to be an absolute clusterfuck. I could be faster doing it by hand, doing throughout the entire month, doing like 12-hour streams and typing Doom by fucking hand. I'm very sure of this. I'm transmitting a checksum. The computer notices. The computer's noticing that something's fishy, something's off. It doesn't make sense. The transmitted data don't make sense. What to do now? I would have to watch that process with my very own eyes, and this is the last thing I want. I could do this by hand at this point. And what if these 10 bytes suddenly become 9 or 8? If I would write the redundancy checking in C, if I would use C, I could use the Watcom compiler and do like and write that whole thing in C. Once compiled, it's definitely gonna be 20 kilobytes. I can't even get these 20 kilobytes transmitted in the first place because it already starts failing at transmitting like these 100 bytes that the hex editor is made of. It won't work. We are stuck. Unless I get this library fixed, we will be indefinitely stuck. I fucking hate this. I fucking hate this IDE. It looks fucking ugly. It's annoying. It's trying to mimic the VS Code bullshit. Is there some way to do this compilation nonsense? Perhaps within the terminal? Where's the link? Where's the information? My goodness. I already hate the entire Arduino sphere just because of their fucking sucking lack of documentation and their philosophy of trying to no-brain their entire their whole environment so that it's not worth working inside of it. But before proceeding, I'd like you to listen to some emotional coal burn of mine. The internet as we used to know it is dying in front of our eyes. Useful information and meaningful content is being pushed away in favor of commercially domesticated brain rot. And I'm doing my very best to counteract this trend by creating educational, high-level brain rot instead. The one you might have already seen from 2022. You get the appeal, and all the info will be down here. Thank you for listening. Let's get back to the thing. So, what was the underlying problem of the PS2 library not doing its supposed thing? I've been using this to send keystrokes between two Arduinos from PS2 dev to PS2 keyboard, and there are some issues. Missed keystrokes. So I had to use software serial.h instead, ditching the PS2 code. Oh my goodness. Oh no. Add mode where attach interrupt will be used to watch CLK pin instead of need to constantly pause it using available or keyboard handle. Oh my goodness. That is. The library turned out to be the problem. This is the very same thing. They made a PS2 library, half-baked, practically unusable, but it's a PS2 emulation library. Fine. No need for others to write a PS2 emulation library anymore, because we have this half-baked thing which is practically unusable. So how do I compile this shit? Documentation, where? The PS2 protocol, even though it doesn't seem like it, is actually bidirectional. Both the computer and the keyboard are able to send data to each other. So here's an example. When hitting caps lock on this computer, it will make the caps lock LED light up. And intuitively, you would think that the keyboard does this on itself. So once caps locked, it lights up the LED and keeps sending uppercase key codes until it is being decaps locked eventually. And to be fair, this was quite the norm for keyboards from the 60s and 70s. Sometimes caps lock was implemented as a physical push button switch. But since the dawn of the IBM PC, this logic has moved into the computer's hardware. So if the computer wants to light up a keyboard LED, it needs to send data back to the keyboard. The problem now is that both devices are sharing a single data line for this. Once the PS2 host, that's the computer, is trying to send something and the keyboard tries to do the very same thing at the very same moment, the keystroke will just go unnoticed. But the Arduino's hardware has no problem whatsoever when having to deal with such timing issues, assuming that there's a piece of software taking care of it, which the PS2 dev emulation library isn't. So they've been implementing a whole bunch of bloat, such as a ladder to key code table and allowing for non-standard keys such as email, search and home to be sent over, as if Y2K and Fruitiger Arrow had just called in and wanted to have their silly gimmicks back. So there was no other option left for me than to just DIY it, which both me and some of my viewers actually managed to pull off, and then lose most of that footage due to YouTube's arbitrary 12-hour cutoff when capturing live streams.
Zwar wollen sie das Licht nicht in Säcken einsammeln, aber sie versuchen es in einer Glasfaser zu speichern.
Thank you, YouTube. But the code was there and I was able to feed the Arduino with keystrokes using its serial interface and then have the Arduino send those to the PS2 host in a predictable and reliable manner. And another problem has occurred. I tried to have the Arduino type in these echo pipe commands and expected them to result in the COM2Textified version of my hex editor. And at first glance it all seemed to work. The file was there and the content was also there. But trying to run it as an application would immediately freeze up the machine. Weirdly enough, on DOSBox this issue has not occurred at all.
Doch, da ist ein Unterschied, du dummer Hurensohn.
And after some digging, I was able to find out that MS-DOS in its proprietary glory has a rather unique and artistically twisted way of parsing stuff and differentiating between commands and parameters. So, do you see this space right here? In the eyes of DOSBox, it's just a syntactically optional thing that separates the echo command from the following meta character, whereas MS-DOS treats it as a part of the parameter string that's to be given to echo, causing the file to contain additional white space at each line and thus corrupting the entire bytecode. And the solution, you might have guessed it, was to simply remove that space character right after each echo command. And at this point I wasn't even sure yet if the Arduino has become really reliable.
Awesome. Correct checksum.
So in order to check for potential transmission errors, I decided to split the doom.zip into a set of chunks and do a bit of checksumming here and there.
Was ist da? Oh! What?
So keep in mind that my hex editor thingy is 16-bit only, and it's fairly easy to overfeed the program's buffer, which I also had to learn the hard way, and then finally rethink my strategy. I've copied an edit.exe and a base64 decoder over to the laptop by using my hex editor, of course, and have them send the hex editor into its well-deserved retirement.
Andrei, I'm actually surprised that you made it here.
Speaking of bombs, this account is also being used for multilingual politically charged shitposting, all under my clear name of course, so gaining a subscriber from Ukraine was just a question of time. And I really owe this guy a favor or two. He just didn't help me understand all kinds of linguistic quirks, he also helped me stay calm during an air raid alert while I was visiting that country. In contrast to another viewer slash personal friend of mine who has sent me this the exact moment the sirens went off. Anyway, let's get back to the thing.
Oh my god, the transmission is complete. Okay. Copy /b d.00 plus d.01 plus d.02 plus d.03 plus d.04 d.05 d.06 d.07 d.08 d.09 d.10. Copy /b d00 d01 d02 d03 d04 5 6 7 8 9 10 doom.zip php nx php copy /b da 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 md5 md5.exe doom.zip. So let's compare it. What does it say? Something 22 blah blah 07. Okay. md5 sum doom.zip. That's the thing. We got it. 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 Okay. 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 CWSDPMI. Loaded. Unzip.exe. Doom.zip. Destination directory doom. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. cd doom. Doom. Oh, whoa, 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 whoa. Oh my fucking goodness, it's done. Oh my goodness. Do you fucking see it? It's fucking Doom. Ah, awesome. Fucking awesome.
So the thing was done, just done, and I wasn't really sure on how to end that stream.
Oh my goodness, oh my goodness, oh my goodness. So, I hope you don't mind, but I need to end the stream. You are the best, you are the greatest, and like all of my viewers who couldn't witness this and just who will watch this afterwards, you're also the greatest. You're the fucking best, and
the very same applies to this video. So if you are in need of another climactic event, allow me to finish you off with a Slavoj Žižek impression of mine.
The spectacle of the modern day content creator, the digital equivalent of a medieval beggar. Imagine, if you will, a person holding a McCafe cup, not in the desolate streets of a crumbling empire, but in the vast infinite expanse of the internet, where the clicks and likes serve as the new currency. This, my friends, is the perfect embodiment of what I call the McDonaldization of begging.